When it goes red, we're live. We're live. We're going to wait a minute before we launch into this thing. Per Jacob's orders. For those of you who don't know, Jacob kind of runs the channel, knows all the tech stuff. I don't know tech stuff at all. Jacob gets lots of text messages from me about how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I send a text message? How do I make a phone call? All that kind of stuff. All right, let's see. He said wait till about 100. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing started. Everybody, welcome back to TarHeal247.com. This is the Heel Report. We are a part of Tar Heel 24/7. That's David Sisk. Most of you know who he is. David is a longtime college, AAU, and high school coach. He has many connections around the sport. In fact, last night, after all this stuff happened, that David was hearing from a lot of his friends in the industry, including current college coaches. He knows quite a few current college coaches, and I was hearing from some people through media and other connections about, hey, who's interested in the job? Who's pushing for the job? Here's what we're hearing. And it was pretty wild to see how quickly so much stuff was tossed our way. But David is exceptionally well connected in the industry. He's coached a ton of players. In fact, he's coached players that played for one of the candidates, one of the coaches we're going to talk about, that played on his national championship teams in 06 and 07. So there's a lot of stuff there. We're going to have sort of an organic conversation, not a checklist or anything like that. We want to talk about the job itself, the quality of the job. David has gathered some perceptions of the job through the industry, and just kind of go from there. We'll take some questions at some point, and we are going to discuss some of the candidates and just get David's take on them as coaches. And of course, you guys will offer your takes as you scroll through this as well. So David, that was a wild ride last night. How was it for you, since we haven't had you on to talk about it? And I've been on like 98 different platforms in the last 24 hours talking about this stuff.
I don't think it's been as hectic for me as it has you, because you've been in demand at a very high level since all this started, and you're trying to get your work done on top of that.
Yeah.
So, I've been I really been kind of pouring into the transfer portal a little bit as that starts, and surprise, we've got that
12 days.
We've got that to look forward to coming up, right?
Actually, it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks from yesterday is when the portal opens.
You got a ton of names already. Don Thomas from LSU, and they're already hitting it. So, but anyway, really just trying to get a lay of the land, on what exactly is right, what's wrong with all the information coming out. Different people hear different things. So really trying to put that all together and just sort my way through. I've not lived on the message boards really as far as putting stuff up. I've answered questions some, but I'm not really dove in deep just as far as saying, okay, here's what I'm hearing, while we try to just, it's early on, just trying to sort through it.
Okay, so your reaction last night, you knew it was going to happen. We've talked and we were prepared we really started preparing Friday for it. That's when I wrote my column. We knew that this was going to happen. It was unavoidable on Saturday, although Hubert, in fairness, I have to say this, and I've talked to the athletic department today, that they were giving him every opportunity they said, hey, come up with some things that you'll fix in the program. They wanted it to work in every conceivable way, although I think deep down they knew it wouldn't. But they wanted to give him that chance. He earned that. They owed him that.
Yeah.
He didn't really have any changes. I don't think he saw some of the problems in the program. What I've heard from people that have played for him, that have been around him in the last several years, and even when he was an assistant coach, that was one of the issues, that Hubert sometimes couldn't see something that was wrong. Everybody else could see it, and it continued because he didn't change, right up to even the suggestions for 5 years that he gives an opening statement in press conferences and wouldn't. He would just go right into the questions, and then would be concerned about questions like mine, saying they were too philosophical at times. So maybe I should ask him later in a press conference, that kind of thing. So when this did happen, though, It's news. It's North Carolina, and clearly North Carolina is branching out, doing something it hadn't done since most of us were alive, have been alive. So, your thoughts when it happened, and just the response and the reaction nationally to this job being the biggest story in sports by far right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. And of course, many of you know, I'll teach school outside of this, so I try to keep up with it from there some as much as I can about getting fired. And but when I get, I had to get in the car and jump home right quick, go home, and it's not a long ride, and I had it on, and man, every sports story, it's just leading with it. And you can come in late and they're talking about a coaching job, and it doesn't matter if it's Fox, if it's ESPN, if it's no matter what it is, they're talking about North Carolina. So, I listen to when I got out of school, I listened to Mad Dog Russo for about 5 minutes. That's what he's talking about. On the way back out here, record here, Stephen A. Smith was on. That's what he's talking about. And I know, but the one thing they're all saying, and you can see it on Twitter, there's a lot of national guys there, whether it be Colin Cowherd, whether it be any of them, is they're all saying, look, North Carolina is as big a brand as it gets. And they're all, and I'll hear those guys start naming in the world of basketball. I heard Chris Russo, Mad Dog Russo say, okay, he started naming them. He said Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, Lakers, Celtics. So that's a pretty big one. That tells you what it's about. There's a lot of people agree with that. So yeah, I know everybody I talk to here, that follow sports will stop, man. What about Hubert getting fired? What about that? What about the coaching job? People never ask about basketball. I mean, my wife doesn't know Hubert Davis from Davis Love, but she
another
knows,
Tar Heel, by the way.
Yeah, but she knows that the coaching job's open. She's got a crush on Billy Donovan for 30 years. So it's got everybody's attention right now, no doubt about it.
In your circles, and a ton of coaches out there, some you obviously talk with more than others, how have you been able to gauge how they view this job, people that are in the business?
I think they understand what it is, and they understand that it can't go the way it's been going. That you get put out in the first round of the NCAA tournament. There's plenty of schools out there are happy to get to the first round. High majors, they're happy to get to the first round of the NCAA tournament. I mean, Nebraska won a game and they're doing cartwheels. So that's no knock on Nebraska, but they are.
No.
And but that's not acceptable at North Carolina, and that's one thing that I really felt that was going. And I'd said all year long that I thought that Hubert had to get through the first weekend. Said it since day one, and he didn't. But people understand. Now, I'll say this. The only thing that they would, in blowback here, that some individuals would have to say, as they said, yeah, North Carolina, there's no doubt about that. But a lot of schools are paying money now to coaches, and a lot of places you don't have the pressure. You could look at North Carolina being a blue blood, and Michigan might be worried about football right now, and Florida might be worried about football right now. But that could be a good thing, too, that Florida is worried about football. Because I guarantee you the people at North Carolina, Kentucky, places like that are not. They're wanting to know why in the world you're not getting wins. So you've got to, when you step on this big stage, I mean, you got to know what comes with it. You've got to have the hide to tough it out.
One of the things that's come up a lot here in the last few days in conversations, and it really hit me, I got to be honest with you, I was 15 feet away from Hubert last Thursday, and he froze. And it was really obvious that position is bigger maybe than I even realized, because I'd never thought of it as being outside the family. When you think of it as being inside the family, like they're all kind of crafted to be able to handle so many aspects of it. And I actually just sent this to a former player too. I sent you guys that photo that was in Getty Photos, and there was a photo of Hubert's introductory press conference, him sitting there, and a photo of last Wednesday in Greenville, and he looked like he's 12 years older. And I sent that to a former player who knows him very, very well, and his response was like, "Holy hell!" And he told me that he thought Hubert had been, for lack of a better term, I'll say, crumbling over the last 6 to 8 months at the pressure of having to deliver at this place was finally getting to him. And if you look at him physically and how he dealt with us and stuff like that, that was the case. That's the case for a guy who played for Dean. By the way, he played for Pat Riley, played in New York City, played with the Knicks. That's a hotbed. And was under Roy, spent time at ESPN, and it was too much for him in a sense. That's what some people around that are fairly close to the situation are now saying. So how many people out there, possible candidates, can handle all that comes with it? It's a lot more than TJ Otzelberger can get guys to switch or rotate defensively and stop every penetration, or he can smack them in the fanny at halftime and get them to come out and play better. There is so much more to that job than just the simple basketball aspect of it.
That's why the interviews, that's why, the search firm speaking to individuals that know them. Look, you're doing the same thing on this coaching search that you're doing when you recruit a player. You're interviewing the history teacher, you're interviewing the parents, the cousins, the next door neighbor, the janitor, and you want to know everything about them. And because you've got to put that together, because that's a big thing. I mean, you don't know until you're thrown in the fire. And I might sit here and say, well, I think I can handle it. Well, I don't know that until I get in it, let alone how somebody else is going to know. But I do think, like I said, they know what color boxer shorts they've got on today. They know everything about them. And all that stuff's important because the vetting process is going to be immense. I know how these things work. Like I said, they know everything there's possibly to know by the time that they make that hire about an individual.
How can you gauge if someone can handle that seat? It's a different seat. And when you look at the candidates, the ones that they're going to get one of, some of the people that the names will throw up here later on, they're going to get one of them probably. How can you tell? How do you know if a guy who's been a head coach for 5 years, even though he's older and he's been in highly successful programs, how he can handle, let's say, a 3-game losing streak in January when Duke comes in or February Duke comes in and beats you? How do you know those guys can handle that? How do you read that as a coach? How can you tell by past performance in games or how they deal in press conferences where you might be able to get a good enough read that, hey, this guy will be okay. He'll take some lumps and it'll take some adjustment getting used for him to get used to being on this platform and under the microscope, but ultimately he'll be okay there. How can you tell?
I just think, like I said, you've got to educate yourself as much as you can, and then it's just a gut feeling. And I think that's it. Unless there's somebody else that's been there before, unless you're going to hire John Calipari or Rick Pitino or somebody like that who's been there, and and I think everything else, like I said, you just try to educate yourself. So I get married, well,
that doesn't usually work out for people.
Well, my mom used to say it's like, getting married, choosing a wife's like jumping off a porch in the dark. You hope you land on both feet, and you don't know till you're in it. You'll see people have dated for years, and then when they live together and they get married, then it's, man, this person changed. So how many times have you heard that? So I think it's the same way, man. You just got to. I think you got to go with your gut. You got to educate yourself as much as possible, and then you hope you're right.
All right, let's get into some of the names.
That you said they were slam dunks for a job. I'll give you an example, man. I thought Dan Mullen would kill it at Florida, and some of these others. And Brian Kelly. I thought they'd be great. If Ed Orgeron could win a national championship, surely God, Brian Kelly can get in the playoffs. But you don't know. And then there's coaches you never thought. Who'd have thought Dabo Swinney would win at Clemson the way he has when he got hired?
Yeah.
So you never know.
I mean, he literally was a place taker. And then all of a sudden they hired him. That's a good point before we get into some of the names. It's most coaches get fired. And if you get hired to coach in the ACC, that means you're really good where you're coming from. And there are a lot of coaches that can handle coaching a certain level of player, let's say in the MAC, if you're coaching at Akron or Toledo or Ohio University or something, and you're great there, like John Gross when he went from Ohio to Illinois, but then you're dealing with a better ball player, a better athlete, and they don't handle him as well. There's various different levels where people sort of max out. And again, that's part of the concern here. So let's look ahead at some of the names that are out there, specifically about their coaching chops. And these are all guys that have coached at the power conference level, and they're doing very, very well. The first name I want to get into is TJ Alsenberger, since I mentioned him a few minutes ago. What do you like about him and the way his teams play?
I said this, if you want a Kevin Sampson type, as far as the way his teams play, I watched them last weekend play Kentucky, and it's one of those deals like it was 8-on-5. I mean, it was just the rotations and the pressure was just, I thought it was phenomenal. And I made a statement then. I went, my goodness, it's like watching Houston or somebody. And if you look at him, I know Jefferson, and that was without Jefferson. And, they don't, I know Taman Lipsy, some of those guys are good, but they got some guys on that team you never heard of. And so it tells me that he's got an environment, a toughness of his program, because he can take some guys that don't look like dudes and wear out your 5 stars. He reminds me of one of those guys you've heard saying, he can take his and beat yours, and you can take yours and beat his. So, that's the way they play. And, I know Iowa State's there in the middle of nowhere, but we tend to look over them. But and I know they've not made a Final Four run yet, but they're there every year as far as nationally ranked, winning a ton of games. And the Big 12 is just a hoss. And they're right there, and that's the way they play every year.
Yeah, he took over an Iowa State program that really hit the skids. Won 2 games, and they were 0-18 in the Big 12 the year before he took over. He's done exceptionally well. I happened to see the Cyclones in person last year in Milwaukee at the NCAA tournament. They played, gosh, I can't remember who it was. It was cool from Tennessee. And maybe it wasn't Belmont. It was somebody else. But anyway, it was Lipscomb. They played Lipscomb in the tournament. Wow. And I was really impressed at how clean his team was. Like everything they did, there was a degree of efficiency to it. There wasn't wasted movement, wasted space, wasted anything. It was really, really high-level basketball, and they were big and physical. And it made me think to what their practices are like. People love to talk about Tom Izzo and pulling the rims off the baskets, but I thought, man, this Otzelberger guy, I bet they have a practice or two where they're not shooting the ball. They're getting after it. And I was really impressed by what I saw. He is a little bit different on the sideline. I think some Carolina fans that I've talked to have said, hey, that guy needs to untuck his shirt or maybe wear a zip up or a sports coat or something. You know how Carolina fans are. But he's intense, and I do think you can see the intensity in him and see how it connects to his team.
Yeah, they're all about physicality and so I guess if you look the part, I don't know many basketball coaches that look that way, but you can go back to football and see some of these guys, ex-players, they're coaching, and you can kind of tell some big offensive lineman is a head coach now wants to run football, and you can tell a little skinny guy wants to throw it. So, but like you say, looks like a linebacker's coach or something, and that's kind of how they play.
He's got a little Gene Katie thing going on. He's got better hair than Gene had, I guess. Let's go to Dusty May. Dusty May is a guy that really splashed nationally when he took Florida Atlantic to the Final Four and followed up with a pretty solid team the year after. In fact, they were in the Jimmy V Classic the following year, and they played in the game before Carolina and UConn. So I got to see some of that Florida Atlantic team in person. Again, he's a guy that actually fits the suit. If you're talking about things that Carolina fans find a little bit important, and I think ultimately then doesn't really matter what a coach is like as long as they win, but he looks like a guy that would fit in Chapel Hill. Yeah. He's composed. There's a gentleman aspect to who he is. And I think one of the things that intrigues a lot of Carolina fans is to look at what he's done with Elliot Cadeau that didn't happen in Chapel Hill. And he instantly turned a Michigan program around that was struggling under Juwan Howard, a program that got rid of a loved former player and has them rolling big time. What do you like about him as a coach?
Also he got Florida Atlantic to a Final Four.
Yeah.
So say that 5 times real fast. It just
and it was a buzzer beater.
Nobody, if you didn't see it, you wouldn't believe it. Florida Atlantic.
They were a buzzer beater away from playing for the title.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Lamont Butler hit a buzzer beater, beat him. So the thing I like about him, I agree with everything you said. Number one, I think he fits. I think his persona, his personality, the way he composes himself during the game, I think all that fits. I think, he's at a public Ivy. I think that's a big issue. North Carolina is too. And you can make a lot of comparisons with the academic requirements and the importance of academics out of Michigan and out of North Carolina. But I look at the style of play too, and he can do it in different ways. But I'm going to tell you, I watched him a lot last year in year one, and I thought he could. I like both his big guys that he had, and I thought that he had the way he uses them, the way they move, the stuff off the screens, the way they cut, screening into shot positions. I was really intrigued by that. And I haven't got to see him as much this year. If North Carolina played or you're working on stories or things like that, you don't get to watch the whole game. And it might be on and you want to see it. And you know what happens. You end up watching him. You know how they played this year. They were on that streak where they were beating everybody by 30 points or more, and it was like half the year. But you turn it on, they're beating somebody to death. And, they've already kind of it's in cruise control by then. So I saw a bunch of that. But yeah. I think he's a guy that could fit. You wouldn't have to sell it. He's had success, a Final Four. He's a 1 seed now. And you just look at their record, and of course they've had an injury, but I mean, they've been maybe the best team in the country for a big portion of the year. And I just like the way they play. I like the way he uses his bigs. I think North Carolina's been used to that. Roy Williams, the way he used them, the way Dean used them. And I think there's a style to his play that North Carolina fans feel comfortable with. And I think his whole persona they feel comfortable with.
He's also been a part of a blue blood before. Yeah. He was a student manager at Indiana when Bobby Knight was there. So he knows what the scent is and what it's like to be immersed in the middle of a blue blood while it's doing blue blood things. And I actually think that that's something that is might be underrated, but I think it's important because it is different. It's different when you walk into those situations. So even though he was younger, he understands and he's been around it before. And I think that would help him as well. I really do like the way his teams play. They're and you're right. Some of the times I wanted to watch them play, I'd turn it on. They're up 25. I'm like, well, I'm not going to waste my time watching this. Game's over already. So I didn't see as much of them this year as I wanted to. I did see more of them last year. Tommy Lloyd is really, really intriguing to me for a lot of reasons. First of all, I adore the way his team plays basketball. Secondly, he spent 20 years under Mark Few. You talk about a guy who squeezed every drop out of watching someone build a great program, a second-tier great program in college basketball in Gonzaga. And here's some connections here. We talked about this a few days ago. Mark Few is might be Roy's best friend in college basketball, Roy Williams. Roy will tell you stories about Mark Few to the cows come home. And Tommy spent 20 years under Few. When Tommy got the job at Arizona, I believe one of the first hires he made was Steve Robinson, who was an assistant for Roy. He was Roy's associate head coach. Hubert did not keep him. We mentioned how Dusty May kind of fixed Elliot Cadeau some. Tommy Lloyd fixed Caleb Love. So there's proof there that what he can do. I think it's something that intrigues Carolina fans. But if you watch his teams play and you love the game of basketball, I don't know how you're not glued to wanting to watch them play again, because they are a gorgeous team. They do things at an exceptionally high level. And even though he's only been a head coach for 5 years, David, he looks like a guy who's been running that program for 20 years and been in the top 10 for 20 years.
And Bart Watt 6561 says Tommy Lloyd's a Beastie Boys super fan too. So you got to put that in there. So they watching him, really a high tempo team. But you look at them this year, and they've got some physicality. In fact, I've heard some announcers say that have watched all these teams a bunch say that they're as physical as anybody in the country. And you got to remember, they did a lot of this year, a lot of their big wins without Cola Pete, who's a real deal with injuries. So they're coming back healthy. I picked Arizona to win it, so we'll see. But, the thing about him, and I'll go to Mark Few, I was around Don Meyer quite a bit, the great Don Meyer, and at Lipscomb. And he always wondered what it would be like if he coached Division I basketball. And he was really close to a lot of clinics with Jerry Krause, a lot of teaching stuff with Jerry Krause, not the Bulls' Jerry Krause, but Gonzaga's Jerry Krause, and he was assistant under him. So he had a lot of those. So just always was fundamentally sound, and had really good stuff that he ran that matched his talent. He recruited to it, but they taught skills more than anything else. So I think he's in a situation now probably where he doesn't have these guys for 4 years, Tommy Lloyd. So you can't watch a guy and say, man, I remember how Andrew Jones was when he came into Arizona, and now 4 years later look at him. And you don't have that. That probably gets left out a lot. But I think, obviously, to win the way he has, he's learned a lot there. I think that style that he plays, it's fast, he score a lot. I think it would be very, very well taken at North Carolina, and he's a big winner. He needs to get past the Sweet 16 this year, and I think he will. But, man, he's won a lot of games in Arizona.
Well, and he likes bigs. He likes big guys. Carolina basketball has been known for big guys forever. The great rebounding. One of the things not discussed about the 5 years of Hubert Davis is how rebounding really dropped off.
Yeah.
Pressure defense. Hubert told us before his first game that he didn't think steals was a very important statistic. And you look at how they didn't pressure defensively and didn't get in transition because they didn't force a lot of steals. That was part of it, and that was always a Dean thing and a Roy thing. Same thing with rebounding. When I look at Arizona, I see them do a lot of those things. And by the way, Jaden Bradley as well. Look at you want to talk about development. There's a guy that's come in and really turned into something under him. I did a podcast with John Henson today, and John is an analyst. He does a lot of stuff with Field of 68 and with CBS. And he's like, Jaden Bradley's a pro. You watch him, he's a pro. Yeah. And where did he become a pro? There. Where did Caleb Love become a pro? There. So there's a couple of selling points right there for Tommy Lloyd. I'm highly intrigued by him. Of the three we just talked about, he kind of intrigues me a little bit more than the other two.
Jaden Bradley couldn't shoot the ball when he got into college too. So they've really worked on that. The scoring aspect of it. Because I watch them play and I'll talk about Jaden Bradley's points, and I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? Yeah. So, we hit everything else. So, yeah, I agree. But like I said, just as player development, I think is really underrated. And the physicality, once again, you don't think that Arizona's got that as much as you think. I think a lot of times we just get caught in, they score a lot of points about them being a finesse team. I think that's they've had some physical post players in the past. And, you know, the one thing, though, with Henry Vasar that an individual told me is that Henry, I'll give Hubert credit that he used him to his strength, and that was a rim run. And a lot of times and then to use him outside to ball screen and then get to the rim. So he got to show that. In Arizona, he went to the block strictly in half court. So there wasn't much stretch, as ball screens, pick and pops, mid rolls, things like that. So, and that probably goes back to tell you that Lloyd wanted his big just right there at the rim to really be physical. Those games I watched him play in Arizona, he was a lot of catches with his back to the basket. So, it'd be interesting to see if he got the North Carolina job, how he would use individuals. But, I mean, there's no doubt about his success.
Well, one aspect of his game that improved tremendously during the course of the season was his ability to get the ball that's back to the basket, feel a defender, and go up and convert that jump hook. And so that's a move he certainly developed during the course of the year. Another coach we want to talk about is not in college, but when he was in college, he turned Florida into one of the best programs in college basketball, played in 3 national title games, won 2, went to another Final Four. So people may not have liked him back in the day because he had a brash style and everything like that, but he backed it up, spent the last 11 years in the NBA, and that's Billy Donovan. I'll say this very, very quickly. I think he's an incredibly intriguing person that could take the job, and the people I've spoken to, quite a few of them, believe that he would have the chops to sit in that seat from day one. So what are your thoughts about Billy Donovan?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that he would. I mean, you go to the NBA, and if he wasn't already tough enough, that prepared him. But
Yeah.
you know, I look at him and I hear people say, "Well, he's been out of the college game," and he has. But number one, the NBA, they do a lot of stuff that they do in college. So I don't think him being out of college game, you look at it and say, well, he's light years behind what they do in modern day basketball. But also, he was doing things at Florida. They were shooting. You go back to his days with Rick Pitino at Kentucky. And, man, they were running and they were shooting more threes. And nobody in the early 90s shot threes like that. Very few. Loyola Marymount. So they were playing that up-tempo style. And then if you look at what he did in Florida, he was one of the first coaches really get into the ball screen. And he did that back in the 90s. And, you know, Bob Knight his deal used to be never screen to the ball, screen away from the ball. And Billy was ball screening before, and he had that thing down to a science. So he knows the ball screen game as much as anybody. So, yeah, and if you look at him recruiting, he went a lot of Europeans. He went a ton, probably too much, and it probably hurt his athleticism a little bit there at one time. But he's recruited big-time high school players. You know, they've not had the transfer portal, obviously, but he's recruited internationally, junior college. So he's recruited at every level, and that tells me that he can adapt. And I'll be honest with you, I think he'd handle it well. I'm not one of those that say he's too old or he's been out of the game too long. I mean, he's a lifer. He loves the gym rats. He used to complain about college basketball. He'd say, man, the thing that appeals to me about the NBA is those guys will play 100 games. He said, that would be awesome. I don't want to play 30 games. I want to play 100. So, and of course, that was years ago, but that just tells you how much he loved it. And he's a true basketball gym rat. And I'll tell you, when we were trying to sell him on Lee Humphrey, who played in our AAU program, we told him, and he was just like, why should I take him? And we basically said, look, everything that we know about you, he's you. You know, he's just going to live in the gym 24/7. So he was that way as a player, and I think he loves it that way as a coach.
Yeah, the 60-year-old thing, I see a lot of comments scrolling by. I don't think it's that big a deal because, first of all, if he gives you 12 years, let's say for the sake of discussion, that is an eternity right now. Because if you go back 12 years ago is when Carolina lost in, what was it, to Kansas, I think it was, in a tournament in 2014. Marcus Page was a sophomore. That's a long time. There's a lot that has transpired since then. And when you think about how Carolina hasn't exactly been North Carolina since the end of the 2019 season, there's a whole lot that could be accomplished in that period of time. So, and there's also 60 now is not what 60 used to be, especially with certain guys. He's in shape. If you watch him, he's fine. He looks like he can handle the job. And I don't think that if it were an issue, they would not be talking to him. I do know there would be the jokes. They hired a 61-year-old Bill Guthridge back in the day. Mac Brown was 68 when they hired him. Of course, Belichick is 73 now. So they hire old coaches in North Carolina. Maybe this one will actually work out. But I do think Billy is 60, but he's a young 60 in my opinion. I think he would be highly invigorated by this. And we know that there are quite a few people that are connected to him in various capacities that believe that he would be extremely interested in this opportunity. Wouldn't be interested in other opportunities in college, but would be with this. Let me ask you one more question about him before we go on to taking some questions from the people who are on here. When you think of a guy that's been out and the different renovations that have happened in the college game, is college basketball and the NBA, are they more alike now than they were when Billy went from college to Oklahoma City? And do you think maybe with the pay for play model that they have now, it would be a fairly seamless transition for him in dealing with college kids that are actually getting paid when they weren't getting paid when he was there before?
Well, 4 or 5 years ago, I think was probably when they were the closest, when everybody was just bombing away threes. But you look now at the old school coaches, the Izzos, the Sampsons, the Patinos, and then you go Altenberger and all those guys that are playing incredible defense and they're low scoring games. And it's like the two posts are back in.
Yeah.
You know, it was like it was all small ball stretch and all that. So it's almost like it's gone back. I think he would be fine anyway. Anyway, win. And I'll tell you this: as far as NIL goes, uh, he was a very creative recruiter. I'll put it that way. When he was at Florida, so I don't think there's going to be any danger of that. He was a guy. A lot of coaches, and you'd be surprised. I know one in the SEC that is uber successful. I mean, Hall of Fame successful, and he has no idea who they're recruiting. And he'll go to the assistants like when they want him to visit, and he'll have to come in and close. He's like, all right, tell me all about this guy. And then he'll go and Billy handled everything. He was like the lead recruiter on all these guys. He really enjoyed recruiting, and he enjoyed getting his hands dirty in there and being a lead on all of them. So, I mean, you'll find very few that enjoyed that part of the game as much as he did. So I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, and you do have some history with Billy Donovan from back in the day. You sent some kids to play for him. So
absolutely.
He used to have a nickname for you too, which I think is pretty interesting stuff.
Well, I don't care to say it. And you guys know, man, I'm country's cornbread. You know that. He called me Forrest Gump. And and this was long before they won the first national championship. So I called him Tom Izzo and he loved it. He just loved somebody getting back with him. And that was the kind because Izzo beat him in the national championship game. So he loved it. But yeah, and I haven't spoken with him in a while, him being in the NBA. But yeah, we used to have a really good relationship. So it's good to hear. I've always been hoping he could come back to college. If it was somebody I've covered or not, I always want him to come back.
I'm trying to think of games I covered that he coached when he was at Florida. One was at NC State when Chandler Parsons hit a shot, more than half-court shot to beat NC State at the buzzer. And that was during that period where there was a little bit of the athletic drop-off you were talking about.
Yeah.
Where his teams weren't elite. They were really good, but they weren't elite. And I would think that he probably would be pretty elite pretty fast. I will say this, that let's say these are the Final Four. Let's say Carolina's head coach comes from this group of four, and we're not saying that they are, but let's say it does. There's going to be a significant upgrade no matter who they choose, correct?
Yeah. Can I say this? This? I know we don't want to speak out of school or anything, and I have no way of if there's a list, I have no way of confirming.
I'm running
You know,
something later,
but
by the way. I'm running. That's why I
but
keep
but
checking my phone. I'm expecting
yeah,
something from somebody. Go ahead.
but I want to say this. I've heard from numerous people, whether it's around UNC, whether it's agents who are aligned with UNC, whether it's college basketball coaches, whoever. And those are the four names that keep popping up. Now, you'll hear different names from each one, but I'm going to say this. Everybody I spoke to, those are the names that keep coming back. And there's others because nobody really has the list. Well, you may have someone say these are the four. And if you ask me, I would say those are probably the four top. Doesn't mean they're going to get them.
Yeah.
But I'm basing that on this is all we is here. I'll talk to somebody, hey, this is who I'm hearing. And there may be 8 names on it. Those 4 are in that 8. It may be 4 names on it. And it's those 4. But I'm hearing that a lot from every side.
Yeah. My initial list that we ran last night had 9 names on there, and I was very clear at the outset of that piece by saying, look, this is a combination of confirmed names and names that are very prevalent in the narrative that's out there. So I thought it was important to address that. A couple of names that a lot of people are still talking about that we have not mentioned, I will tell you, both of them in the SEC, they're not candidates for the job. So that's 100%. Okay, let's go ahead and take some questions from people. I know that some of you guys have asked stuff already, but I'm not going to scroll up. So go ahead and fire some questions off here, mainly for David. You guys have not had an opportunity to ask him questions previously. So go ahead and is Hubert if Hubert had not had so many missed foul shots, why did Hubert miss foul shots? What did you think about Hubert's? We asked him about it. Somebody in the media, one of us would ask about it. God, every other time we had him, it seemed like, about the fact that they just stunk at the free throw line. You had some really good shooters who could not shoot free throws. And basically his response was, we don't work it on the season. We don't work on the form. We do all that stuff in the off season. And we don't say too much about it because the more we say about it, the more they're going to think about it. What did you think about how he responded to those questions about free throw shooting?
You know, one of the best high school coaches I ever saw as far as being able to teach shooters. And I asked him, I said, do you put the pressure on them? And he said, absolutely. Absolutely. And you hold them accountable in practice. I think you need to do that every day. And you need to hold them accountable. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to work. I've heard coaches say, I don't get it. We've done everything. We make them run. We make them do push-ups. We have all these ramifications if they miss and they're still missing. But I just feel like you got to hold them accountable, and that's something you got to work on every day. That's like playing golf and say, I really don't work on my swing.
Yeah, but so much of it's mental, though. You can see a guy who can shoot, and I see him shooting warm-ups all the time. They go to the free throw line. Seth Trimble in warm-ups hits his free throws all the time. Gets into a game, he's guaranteed 1 for 2. It seems like every time.
Well, I would say this too before the game. Do you have a good lather going when you're shooting? Do you shoot them tired? I know a lot of successful coaches, they'll run them in the ground, do a lot of sprints and all that, or do it at the end of practice, but they do it when the fatigue is at its max. Right. So, I don't know if you shooting before a game and you don't even have a lather worked up yet, not a bead of sweat. I don't know how much game like that is.
Yeah, I'm thinking more in terms of form and stuff. And part of the being tired is fighting through that. That's some of the mental stuff that when you're tired, you have to be able to work through. Someone says, hey, David, what would you have done differently in the second half against VCU? I don't know if I want to go revisit that game. I appreciate the question, but I don't want to revisit it right now. I think
I'll say this.
Move forward. Go ahead.
I'll say this. Just some of the game situations, timeout at the, on the end out. I would have definitely used it there. But, that's like you said, we don't want to go through the whole thing, but that would, I guess that's the first thing. The first thing that stuck out to me was just kind of situationally.
Yeah, So, Ben McCollum's name every time I glance over here, Ben McCollum's name comes up, and I love stories like that. Dudes like that are I find very,
Yeah.
very intriguing. He's won at a lot of lower levels. So, but if someone said he would be like the Kurt Signetti of college basketball, well, then he probably needs to be at a place that's like Indiana, because Signetti never would have been hired by Ohio State or Alabama. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I saw somebody ask for the second time how far would Billy Donovan have taken his team, and it's hard to say with the injuries, but I think the roster makeup, let me say that, would have looked a little bit different, uh, and I just don't like the way it was aligned. Like I said, I thought you had too many set shooters. Um, and when they weren't making shots, they didn't give you anything. I think if Billy had been the coach, I think that you'd have had a different looking roster.
Yeah, I think I'm figuring stuff out with this live. Jacob would be proud of me for what I just did. I think. Can you see the question on the screen?
Yes.
Will the outrageous buyout for these coaches, excuse me, be an issue for Carolina's athletic department? Will a booster stroke the check? I will say right now that finances will not be an issue.
Right.
Finances will not be an issue for North Carolina.
And there's probably, when you look at a lot of stuff, when you look at buyouts, other buyouts besides Hubert Davis, there's going to, we'll see the question, who else goes with him, that's involved in the basketball program, and I'll leave it at that. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I'll say this: I've always wondered this about college basketball. Do the GM and head coach are they going to be joined at the hip? If you have a new head coach come in, are you going to have a GM that he knows and they have a working relationship together and they know they're on the same page? You see it in professional sports all the time. There's a power struggle, and the head coach ends up leaving because he can't get along with the GM or vice versa.
By the way, Tommy Lloyd has a new AD at Arizona. So there's something there. What is the future with incoming kids for next year, Dylan Mingo and Maximo Adams in particular?
I'll go with what Eric Bossy said. I think Maximo Adams said that he wanted to play for Hubert Davis. I've reached out to the high school coach and him today. I haven't heard anything yet. Mingo they're going to let us know something here. They're kind of weighing it. But I want to say this. When he got hurt, I think a lot of the other programs that was recruiting and kind of got cold feet as far as the big bids go. They still wanted him. North Carolina was all in. So I don't think, and we'll see what the new coach thinks. And I think that it'll be up to the new coach where he wants to go with Mingo or not for what the type of money he's going to be getting. But I'm going to tell you this, North Carolina was all in like nobody else. So I think probably with Mingo, if there was any way he could stay, honestly, I think he would probably like to.
I agree with you. There's been some stuff about Jim Tanner. I've gotten to know Jim a little bit here in the last year, and I like him. I enjoy having conversations with him. He's a very, very sharp guy. Right now, my understanding is that he is handling some of the transition right now, communicating with the players. There's an assistant or two that is as well. I'm not 100% sure which assistants. It's one of the things I'm waiting to get some text messages from some people tonight. I like you said I would think that a coach comes in, he would sort of want a GM that he can work with, but we don't know how much of whatever went wrong was Jim Tanner or what was just Hubert. I mean, Hubert was resistant to having a GM. He was resistant to a lot of that stuff. He told us a year and a half ago in Charlotte that North Carolina is not a transactional program. When you go hire Jim Tanner, it becomes a transactional program just by the idea that you have a GM. Do you have any thoughts about Tanner, or is that something we should probably stay away from?
Yeah, let's stay away. But it was something that would involve him. I see a question here. What's our NIL budget? $7 million right when I hear with the revenue share, and a couple 100,000 right now as far as the contractual stuff that the boosters help supply. But I think that was one reason they're going to make a change, and they've shown it here. You're going to see that go up. So I think their NIL is going to be very, very competitive.
Yeah, and one thing I can also say is that that's a big challenge. I told you about a conversation I was a part of about a month ago where the topic of money came up. And the fact that you have your revenue share, but you can go outside that by lining up NIL deals for kids. And they were really, really having a hard time with that for basketball, which was a surprise to a couple of us in the room. And one of the things that was basically said was, look, if other schools are doing certain things, we have to do that too. And we cannot be behind. We must be at the forefront at the front of this with some other schools or maybe even ahead of them. And my read on that and in subsequent conversations is, and now where they are, North Carolina is prepared to do everything it has to do financially to compete for national championships. And that's a big part of why this move is being made. It's something that had been thought about for a long time, David. And it's something, quite frankly, that the groundwork has been made for some time, knowing that or believing that this would probably occur. Hubert had to give them what he gave them, and he did, and it opened the door to make this move. They're prepared to go full throttle forward, and that means that $7 million in rev share is just a small part of it. There's going to be a lot more added to that they'll be able to line up for kids. And I would say, I was told yesterday that 15 million might be the starting point. This year's roster was 14. Next year's roster, if everything plays out the way that they think it will, 15 million would be the starting point.
A couple other questions here. What's in my drink? Crystal Light grape, not crystal meth, Crystal Light. And
Gatorade Zero. I'm a Gatorade Zero guy.
Okay, gotcha. Is Caleb Wilson any chance of him coming back? No. I think Michael Malone, I saw that question. I have not heard his name mentioned.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Let me add, too, Brad Stevens' name never came up. We had him on the list because he was part of the narrative, and I saw something today where he took his name out of the running. I cannot honestly tell you that his name was even in the running. I have not. I know that some people have reported that Carolina reached out just to reach out. I have not gotten it, so I can't report it because I haven't gotten it, but I never thought that he was a legitimate candidate. I thought all along, going back to this past weekend, when you and I started talking about names, the four that we've discussed were four that we discussed then. Otzelberger's made a little bit more of a move than I thought over the weekend. And I thought for a while that Todd Golden might be a name that they'd be interested in, because when you watch his teams play, they play a lot like Roy teams. But Golden, someone said to me on Friday afternoon, or it was Saturday afternoon, do you really think they want that lightning rod in Cameron Indoor Stadium? And the answer is no. So that's one of the several reasons why he is not on the list. A couple of other questions here.
Yeah, let me say one that I saw.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was one that asked about, and it was back just a few minutes ago, about did they get Hubert Davis help or why didn't? He had it this time. Now, a year ago, when it was apparent that it was kind of going down this road, Hubert was beloved in an athletic department by a lot of people. And they said that if he fails, they wanted to give him a chance to find out, to give him a fair shake and let him have the money that he needed to compete to do that. And depending on who you believe this past year, it was between a $10 and $14 million roster. So, but it was definitely double digits. So they were pretty competitive. Maybe not so much the last few years, but they were more competitive this year.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pop another question up here. See if I can do it. There we go. Hey, Matt, you're watching me learn how to be a tech guy right in front of you. How many current players do you believe will transfer, and how many will stay on the current roster? I've been working on this. In fact, we started working on this about, let's say, late February. We did not run anything until after the final game was played, because I don't think it's right to run something like that while the season's still going on. But most of the information that we had was based on Hubert still being the head coach. And I know that there's several players that were very interested in coming back. A couple big guys. Jaron Stevenson's front door is 8 miles away from the Dean Dome. It will change now, obviously, with whoever the head coach is, because it may not even be up to some of the players. Some of the guys that want to come back, it may not even be their decision if the new staff doesn't want them. So we'll wait to find out who ultimately gets the job. And then they'll have those conversations. And David, this is why I had a conversation with somebody in the athletic department today where I said, this is why you guys may not be able to afford to wait until the national championship game, because the portal opens the next day. If you hire someone next
another
week,
question.
they
Will
get
it get
time.
done by the time the portal starts?
Yeah, that's the thing. One of the problems that Bill Belichick had, you could say what you want about him, but they were well into the portal when he landed, and he didn't have any assistants and had no idea what the hell he was doing in the portal. And one of the reasons I talked to him yesterday, and he said one of the reasons, I asked him about roster building. One of the reasons they had 40 freshmen this year is because they were trying to catch up for what they missed a year ago. So you don't want that to happen in basketball. It's not going to be as necessary. I think Jay Lucas and Ryan Odom proved that you can build a roster from scratch overnight and be pretty good. But if you can keep some guys, especially because of what this school is, what this program is, and all that stuff, man, if you could keep 3 or 4 or 5 kids that are scholarship dudes on the team, have some continuity moving forward, some familiarity with the fans, and maybe even a few other people in the program, that would be ideal if possible. But until they hire a coach and we find out what that coach's mission is and what kind of conversations he has with players that can return, we just won't know the answer to that.
Also, answer the question about Hoots. I've seen a couple on here about him.
A lot of them.
What about his job title and all that? Exactly what he.
Eric Hoots is. I would describe him. Actually, a neighbor of mine asked me about him today, and I would describe him as the caretaker of the program. First of all, he is an incredibly awesome dude. He's been around the program since he was a student manager a long time ago. He is the go-to guy for all former players. He's the go-to guy for a lot of people about various different things. He is always there with a smile and a handshake. He will show a lot of recruits and their families the facilities. He will escort them around. He handles a lot of operations stuff. Players call him coach because he's not on the floor teaching them moves or anything like that, but he's such an important part of the infrastructure of the program that I believe personally, if you were to have a pecking order of current people in the program that the next coach would be very wise to keep, it would begin with Eric Hoots. Absolutely no doubt about that. And there are some others I think they should keep. I think they should keep Doug Halverson as well, who's the trainer. And there are a few others. I could give a list if y'all really, really want, but I probably should hold off on saying other names because I don't really need to go there given certain relationships.
I saw a couple of questions on here too about where Hubert Davis, he wants to coach again, where he could be at. I think a mid-major. I think somewhere where he's comfortable. He's originally from a Washington, D.C. area. Maybe something came available there. But I just think it needs to be somewhere kind of off the beaten path a little bit where the pressure is not too great, because I think that would really help him right now, because obviously, like you say, just it's taking a toll on him, the pressure. I think somewhere where he can just relax and enjoy it.
I was surprised at his statement last night when he said he wanted to coach somewhere else. I had no idea.
And I was surprised he fought it like he did.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation right there. I don't know how comfortable I am getting too far into it, but he surprised everybody in the process that he pushed back as hard as he did. And the other thing is that the act of service as being North Carolina's head coach, which is something we heard dozens and dozens and dozens of times, led people to believe that he would also walk away somewhat peacefully and be very grateful for the 5 years and still be a part of things in some capacity. Nobody thought that he wanted to coach anywhere else. That was never, ever something that ever came up. And when he said that in his statement, I could tell you that some people around Chapel Hill were really surprised that he said that. So if he does want to coach, I agree with you. I think mid-major, Atlantic 10, maybe a little bit lower than that. The DC area, George Mason's got a good coach in Tony Skinn. George Mason University, it used to be called the Patriot Center. I don't know what it's called now. That's like 6 miles from Lake Braddock High School, which is where Hubert played. That would be pretty. I kind of thought Carolina would go up there and play Mason too, by the way. So one of those Hubert going home games, but they didn't. I know that the American job is in good hands with Dwayne Simpkins and Jackie Manuel's on that staff. George Washington is a program that's doing okay. Georgetown is kind of in limbo with, not limbo, but I think there's some concerns about Ed Cooley moving forward. That would be a job that maybe if you're going to go if you're going to a power conference, maybe. I just don't know. I think it's going to be hard for him because that final look was bad look across the board. And he'll do a good interview. He'll sell himself pretty well, but it's still a bad look. And I think might take some time before he gets anybody taking a look at him as a head coach. Somebody might want to bring him in as an assistant or as associate head coach, but as a head coach, it might be difficult for him.
Okay, I'm going to bite. I saw a question on here, and I'm going to bite. Who would you like to see get the job? You don't have to, Andrew, but I'm going to do it. Mine would be Dusty May at Michigan.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
I think that all the way around, that's the best fit. Here's a good question right here.
And real fast, I put this question up there so I wouldn't lose it because it's scrolling so fast. Who would I like to see? Man, that's a hard question for me to answer because my rooting interest, I've covered this program for a long time. Some of you may not know, I've covered the ACC for years. When I was at Fox Sports, I was at Wilmington Star News. I did the whole ACC at Fox Sports. I was actually the interim. I replaced Jeff Goodman, and I was the interim national college basketball writer for a while at Fox Sports. My first story was about Penn State basketball. I was like, wow, okay, I'm jumping into some waters I don't know a whole lot about. It's a very difficult gig to do the national thing, and guys like Jeff do a great job. But I did the ACC as a whole, football and basketball, and I did pro sports and everything else. And when I did that, it was a lot easier to come out and say certain things like, hey, I'd like to see that guy as a coach here or there. In this job, it's really difficult because I cover one school, and some people expect us and maybe at the other site, which is our competitor, to be fans of the school, when in reality, it's probably better to have people that are not, because you get objective analysis, objective coverage. So you have to be careful when you say, I'd like to see somebody like this get the job. That being said, I think all four, and this is going to sound like such a crappy cop-out, I think all four would be significant upgrades. The one of the four, the one I would be most skeptical about would be Otzelberger, simply because he's coaching at Iowa State the way you probably need to win at Iowa State. At North Carolina, he's going to be able to get, as Al McGuire used to say, all the ballerinas that he can fit into the building. He's going to get those kind of kids. Can he coach them like he coaches the guys at Iowa State? I have no doubt that Dusty May and Tommy Lloyd could coach the ballerinas because they're already doing it. And obviously Billy Donovan has. So he would be fourth out of those four. I like the Donovan aspect of it because I believe that he's got the chops to sit in that seat. I really do. And I think that's important. And I saw that up front, and it really hit me last week. And I can't get the image of Hubert literally freezing right in front of me out of my mind. I mean, that was a big deal. I felt bad for him. I know a lot of people say, oh, he's got a $5 million parachute, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter, man. The guy put everything into it. I felt bad that he froze. It was just a really, really rough sequence of events for him as a coach and as a person. But he still had that opportunity. His job at North Carolina is to not freeze. So that's one reason he doesn't have the job anymore. Billy won't freeze. I don't think Dusty would freeze. I don't think Tommy would freeze. Tommy would have the support of Roy. Somebody asked earlier about Roy. Roy is in agreement with the moves that have been made. Brian Murphy, who does outstanding work at WREL, had caught up with Roy the other day and asked him about it. And Roy said, I'll talk to you about golf and water polo. I'm not talking to you about that. He didn't voice support for keeping here, but he understood that the program needs to be better. So the thing is, Tommy Lloyd would be sort of a Roy connection there too, because of Mark Few and Steve Robinson, and of course Caleb Love and all that kind of stuff. So I would say one of those three would be outstanding hires, and I think North Carolina would be a contender to win the national championship by year two, perhaps even by year one, depending on when they start the job and how well they would do in the transfer portal. Another question that we have up here. Well, that's the one I just answered right there about how Roy has reacted to all this. So I have my glasses off, so I couldn't see.
There was another one on here, and once again, no, Michael Malone, not heard that mentioned. About if there was a coach off the radar that we've not heard anything about, that's not been mentioned on anything that you would like to see them maybe go after. And I don't know. I'm gonna tell you what. If Jai Lucas, he's not ready now, I think that'd be too much. But man, I'm gonna tell you what. I think he's got a chance to be just elite, just to see where he's at in another 10 years. Because man, he couldn't have done any better his first year. Just to put that roster together.
Sidebar, I'm not putting words in Roy's mouth. I just know that he didn't support him, and I've talked to people, and that Roy understands this had to be made. That's coming from multiple sources. So I'm not putting words in Roy's mouth. I would never do that. Jay Lucas, you know what? You were talking about the way the game's going back to the bigs and more physicality. Yeah, 37-year-old head coach who has the basketball experiences that he does. And he's recognized that, and that's why Miami made immediate impact right away in year one because of that style of ball. And you need some of that. If you get bullied, you get bullied. Skill can only handle getting bullied so much.
Question here about Matt Painter. Man, it would be a shock, but yeah, he's definitely good enough. I think he's a great coach, but he's Purdue's in his blood. A question about Henry Vasar. Do we think Henry would go pro? And I've said this, he could get a guarantee if he's front end in the second round. He could get a lot of those guys. He's been projected right now to 36 pick. A lot of those guys get a 2-year out of a 4-year deal. They'll get like 2 guaranteed. He's going to make, if he went around 34th to 36th, he would get about $2.5 million a year. Will go up right around $10 million over a 4-year contract that he would get. So, also he's getting married. I don't know if they've set the date yet, but he's going to get married. So he's got a lot of life changes coming because he's got a lot of things to consider here. Personally, I don't think he'll be back, but I don't think it's cut and dried like Caleb Wilson.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing too is, if he does come back, he's 23 in the draft next year, 23 years old. So that's something to consider as well. We have been told that, and this was before Hubert was fired, that if Henry were to come back to college, it would be at North Carolina. So now that a lot of stuff's up in the air. A lot of stuff that we thought was etched in stone a week ago is no longer, because the stone has been removed. And we'll have to see. Let's see. Where is Sean Miller? That's kind of a strange question. What are the odds that none of the four? Yeah, I know. What are the odds that none of the four take the job? And by the way, Brad Underwood walked by me last week, and all I could think about was, this guy's got to be Gene. And there's a Gene Katie mention again. Gene Katie's cousin. He just got a little of that stuff going on. What are the odds that none of those four end up the head coach? It would be a guess on our part right now. I think I would never say not at all. It's very possible that they get great deals where they are and stay. They're in good places. They can obviously win big where they are. They don't need the ego of being at North Carolina, or maybe they don't need the challenge of being at North Carolina, and they can make a ton of money somewhere else without having to be the microscope. But another thing that's been advanced to me too, Dave, and I'd like for you to comment on this. One line of thinking is, God, he went to a title game. This is the 30,000-foot view, but he went to a title game. He was a number 1 seed, won an ACC regular season in a different year, 18-0 at home this year. They were 24-6 when Caleb had the second injury, and they ran him out of town. That would be a narrative. And some coaches might think, man, if they do that to one of their own, a Dean guy, a Roy guy, a Guthridge guy, Walter Davis's nephew, what would they do to me? I think that that's a fair thing to bring up, because that might be a question that a representative for a prospective coach might ask, or at least just discuss with people, maybe not directly in the hiring, but about people that know North Carolina and been around North Carolina?
I don't think it's a big issue because I've not even heard anybody in the national media saying, what are they doing? Why'd they get rid of him? I mean, what are they thinking? I mean, it's not even been
I have.
controversial. There's
I
not
have
been
a
many.
few.
There's
Well,
not
you
been
know what?
many.
You're right about the
And,
media. It's people like Seth Greenberg, and
yeah,
Seth Greenberg is who he is. And these coaches sometimes are so married to the
he's got his
fraternity.
people he carries water for too. And you got to remember
There's
that.
yeah,
But
ever since the certifiably insane comment, the ACC tournament, I only
I
take him with a certain amount of
I don't
seriousness.
think I don't think in that situation that I just don't think that that's a big issue. I really don't think that's a big issue. I think people know that they were underperforming.
Yeah,
I saw some questions here. Or will they hire anybody in the family? Uh, Not as head coach. They may
not
have
as head
somebody
coach.
as assistant, but not as head coach.
Yeah, and there's a possibility that whoever the new coach is, he keeps a couple of the assistants. I know that there's some people that think very highly of the future that Marcus Page has. I've seen Marcus work out with guys. Marcus appears to have a really good temperament and a way of communicating with guys, and he's a good motivator. Marcus, I know that the Seth Trimble's family really thinks the world of Marcus, and he's helped Seth a ton with a lot of stuff. Marcus was a very cerebral player and was very mentally tough. If you go back and look at that national title game in 2016, the way he played late after the way he played earlier is a perfect example of the kind of dude that Marcus Page was as a player and is right now. I think Sean May has improved a lot as a big man coach. Henry Vessar will tell you that one of the reasons he has developed so much since he arrived was Sean May. Teaching him how to use his body to get separation is something a lot of big men are not very good at, and Sean has been outstanding at helping Henry develop. Henry will tell you that 1,000 times over. As far as the other assistants go, Brad Frederick. Go ahead. You go on and comment.
Well, no, go ahead. I was going to change the subject.
Yeah, I'm
OCD. I see these questions.
No, that's all right. You're OCD and I'm long-winded. So together, that's why we make such a great tandem together. You're OCD and could cut me off, and I'm long-winded could cut you off. So I'm just going to say very quickly, nothing has been articulated about who must be kept. If there's any deal like that, we don't know what's going to happen. Brad Frederick has been with the program for a long time. Roy worked for his dad. His dad was Roy's AD at Kansas. There's a lot of lineage there with Brad. Brad was a walk-on the 96 and 97 Final Four teams. So he's got a ton of history, obviously, there. Jeff Lebo, I don't know if Jeff would even be interested in sticking on, to be perfectly honest with you. He was painting a boat, working on his boat when Hubert called him 5 years ago. Pat Sullivan has never had a problem getting a job in basketball. I actually think Pat would be really good in a GM's office as someone who does a lot of player evaluation and stuff like that. I think he's excellent there. That's what most of his career in the NBA has been. So there are roles that some of these guys can fill for a new coach. But again, we have no idea who that coach will be, what they'll want. They might want a total clean house. Matt Doherty did that and caused problems. He was in the family and still cleaned things out and got off to a terrible start, and it never really got corrected. So we have to wait and see who the new coach is and how they go about things. But there are some pretty good options if they choose to keep some people around.
I've seen a question. Are there any openings that could come up that could poach any of these guys? And I don't think so. And I'm going to answer another question here about Bill Self in Kansas. I've heard it's Jock Vaughn when he retires. So no, I don't think so. I think your next shoe to drop could be Kentucky next year. So I mean that's another school that could come into play, but that's not going to impact this season. Somebody asked me, do we learn anything from Kentucky and from what they went through 2 years ago? And I just think they were kind of different. They went back into the family. And when Pope got that job, a lot of people were really surprised. They weren't talking about him a whole lot. And I think either they thought that they weren't going to get anybody, or maybe they had their heart set on him because he played at Kentucky, he played for Patino. But I thought they got off the trail pretty quickly and settled for him. I'd say the one thing I would learn is do your due diligence all the way through. Don't get afraid and settle.
Yeah, I get the vibe from Pope that he was able to say a lot of things that got people pretty excited earlier, but you can't keep saying the same things. And that's one of the criticisms of Hubert, and something that's been advanced to me that I've kind of tried throwing out there earlier this year, that the kids can only be invigorated hearing the same thing so many times. You got to do things different ways. You've got to communicate different ways. And that Hubert had a certain drumbeat to the 4 or 5 things that he would go to get motivation and inspiration. And after a while, they didn't hear it as much. And that's something that each of his teams has kind of dealt with a little bit. And early in the year, when they were having to come from behind, they were getting off all those slow starts, and we hear about how Hubert would throw a clipboard in the locker room at halftime. I mean, you're doing that in November a couple of times. You've only got so many times you can do that, David. And I get that vibe with Mark Pope as well.
Question about the conditioning. Do North Carolina use sports science? Yes, they do. But question about them with the minutes and all that. I mean, you're playing 3 guys, 42, 43 minutes. And I'll say this, I think it went for the minutes of Hubert the same way it did with shot selection, with the analytics. He didn't follow analytics. I don't think he kept up with them at all. So I think it was totally a feel thing. So I would say about playing a lot of minutes, tiring out. I don't know that as far as the numbers go, the science and analytics, I don't know that it was followed that closely. I just think it was a feel on his part.
Any chance any current players enter the portal before the new coach is announced? Well, the portal doesn't open until the day after the national championship game. Some guys can announce that they intend to enter the portal, but it doesn't open until then. I guess it depends on when they hire the coach. That's the thing. Let's say they hire a guy who wins or loses the national championship game. If you win it, he's got to do a celebration the next day, and then hired 2 days later in a new school. It probably wouldn't happen that quickly. It would certainly be an awkward look. So the portal's only open 15 days this year. That's it. And then it closes. Now you can acquire players after the 15 days, but your guys can only enter. And one of the reasons why the conversations I've had with multiple people over in Chapel Hill about why the preference would be to get somebody in sometime early next week is that would give that new coach a week to evaluate what's already there. Because there's a lot of players that are there on the roster that can return. And back in the fall, the program communicated to me that they were very confident that they would be able to retain a lot of those guys going into the next year. Well, that's all not a possibility now because that's not the staff anymore. So a lot of these kids would want to know who the coach is and how he views them. They will have questions as well, and he'll have to figure them out before he makes any decisions about how much that coach will need from the portal and how much money that coach is going to have to spend to get what he needs from the portal. And they're going to have to probably reach some new deals with current guys anyway. Not all of them had 2-year deals. So if you're to take Jaron Stevenson as an example, Jaron had a certain number last year. I think that when you look at his performance, he probably would make no more than he made a year ago, perhaps even less. You'd have to work out that deal. And new staff would have to give an evaluation to that player, and the player would then have to figure it out. So I don't think obviously nobody can go into the portal before the day after the title game. Maybe some guys will announce that they're going to. They just want out anyway. None of them have done that yet. But they're probably waiting and seeing. And they're dealing with the shock right now, too. But they're waiting to see who they bring in.
Question about would the results of any of the NCAA tournament games from here on out influence the search? I don't think that it would influence the search as far as all of a sudden somebody moves up to 1 or 1A.
Yeah.
But it could influence the timing. So that's the thing you're looking at. It has to go back with what we're talking about, what Andrew was talking about. Do guys transfer out beforehand? I mean, we don't know how long it's going to be, because if Dusty May is definitely a guy that you want to track, and that's the gamble, the whole thing. If he's a guy that you really got your heart set on, or Tommy Lloyd or somebody like that, you're talking about 2 more weeks. So, it's going to be, I think, like I said, I think it's timing more than anything. And, who knows? That whole timing could help a guy like Altenberger. It really could. If he's a strong candidate, and I feel like he will be. So if you've got 4 guys that you really like, are you going to put one off? Those saying, what is it? 1 in the hand's worth 2 in the bush. So if you take off or just put off on one, well, and let me try to get this guy, and then you lose the guy who's really, really good. That may not be a route you want to take. That's why they get paid the big bucks.
North Carolina cannot afford to make a mistake with this hire. So because of that, if they have to wait till 5 days after the portal opens to announce somebody, and they think that's the right person, like that's the guy, that's their dude, they're going to do that because you're going to have that person in from that point on. So you get a little bit of a late start. These guys, these coaches know the portal because they're coaching right now. They already have stuff in process about what they want. They can always bring a few players with them, which would be an easy transition in some cases. But you've got to get the right coach, because the right coach is going to be there when the portal closes. He's going to be there over the off season. He's going to be there when the season starts next year. He's going to handle everything and be there basically 3 to 5 years. You really can't, to me, you can't sacrifice. You can't replace number 1 with number 2 or number 3 just because he's available a week sooner. It would be optimal. It would be optimal if they get him in before the portal opens, but if that's not the right guy and the right guy plays Monday night, the first Monday in April, they're going to have to live with it. And I think that they're prepared to live with it.
And also one of the questions on here was, oh man, let me go back here. There's so many. I'm sorry. I'm looking at them. I got totally.
Let me do the one I put up. Let me do the one I put up on the screen real fast. Very quickly, Mark Byington. I love Mark Byington. He brought a JMU team to Chapel Hill a couple years ago, and I really, really liked him. One reason is because I used to work for the Wilmington Star News. My dad lives in Wilmington. He's from there. So I follow the UNCW program. I covered some stuff, wrote columns when Brad Brownell was there. That's how I got to know Brad. I got to know Jerry Wainwright when he was there. Byington was obviously before them, but he was one of the really good players. I think he played for Kevin Eastman. I'm not 100% sure. But he's done an outstanding job where he's been, and he had an instant impact at Vanderbilt. You've got to love the way he plays, and a couple of former Tar Heels elevated when they went to play for him. The problem there, the risk there, is he's only had 2 years in a power conference, and he hasn't gotten out of the first weekend. It would be very difficult to sell, especially the donors who you want to pony up a ton of cash, that, hey, we got rid of a guy who's been to 2 Sweet 16s, and he played for a national title, for someone who hasn't been out of the first weekend in the NCAA tournament. That's why, to me, Mark Byington would be, if they don't get any of these 4, then maybe you go to the next tier, and Byington would be in that tier.
Yeah, and there was another question here. I've said, do any of the former players, Hansborough, MJ, any of those? I couldn't imagine MJ. He's a pretty successful NASCAR owner right now. If any of those would get involved, I'd say Hansborough. Some of those, they might. I don't think that's totally out of the question at all. I don't know, but I don't think that's out of the question. Also, one thing I wanted to say here that I was going to say, and I saw a question pretty similar on how many coaches are reaching out to UNC. Let me say this: there's agents reaching out.
Yeah.
And that I've heard this. I'm not going to say the names of the coaches because I can't verify it that I know, but it was told to me, and the source who told me knows a lot that's going on at North Carolina. And so I don't really doubt him, but I don't want to use the names here. But there were 2 agents reached out over the weekend for 2 big name, highly successful coaches. And they basically told the agents, from what I understand, that they weren't interested. North Carolina did. So it's going through the agents right now. I don't think May or Lloyd or Altenberger or any of those guys are in direct discussions with North Carolina. But let me tell you, the agents and the powers that be at North Carolina, the search firm, the ADs, anybody that's in a decision-making mode or putting this all together, they're having a lot of conversation.
Yeah, I'm just going to pop this up here real fast because a few people may have misunderstood what you said about Joel Berry, excuse me, MJ Hansbrough. You weren't talking about them being head coach. You were talking about input.
No, they were talking about them being
all that
involved
input
in the hiring process.
Yeah, exactly. Now I got to figure out how to get rid of this.
Okay,
here we go.
You take Hansbrough and guys like that, they're pretty prevalent on campus.
He's there. Tyler's there all the time.
Yeah.
I see he does some of the color commentary on radio. He's there at most all the home games. He does stuff for Field of 68. Joel obviously is on the ACC network, so they are both they're commentators and they're speaking about it in a professional capacity. And Tyler lives there in town. He works out in the gym. He knocks out Armando Baycott's teeth, which is one of the great stories that Armando told, of many great stories Armando told when he first arrived. I would think their input would be if Bubba Cunningham or Steve Newmark happened to bump into Tyler and he talks for a few minutes. They can't have too many people giving their take on this, because once you get Tyler and Joel, then you get a few others. You could have too many people, too many chefs in the kitchen, so to speak.
Which answers a question here about the most influential voice in this other than the ADs. And like you say, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. I would say outside of them, probably just the company that's doing the search committee. I think that would be probably the biggest one. Also, I see Eddie Bach reference.
I saw Eddie Biedenbach in like a Hobby Lobby in Wilmington a couple of years ago. Don't ask me why I was going in there. I was doing a favor. But Eddie Biedenbach was in there following his wife around. All I could think about was that poor dude. But here I am by myself going in there doing the same thing. I was doing the buying and he's just following. So I remember Eddie was at NC State a lot. He obviously played at NC State. He was head coach at Asheville for a while, but he was assistant at NC State when I was covering NC State a lot. And I've never met a person that had anything but glowing stuff to say about Eddie. But that's pretty funny that his name came up there.
Question here. Explain how the job search works. Is it mostly agents coming inbound or the search firm reaching out to a list of names? Yes, it's both. So they're going to reach out, and you've got, like I said, you've got the agents already reaching out, and they'll let them know if there's no interest there. Like I said, from what I was told, there was two big names that called in over the weekend agents, and they were told no interest.
Yeah, I believe that this process has a fairly narrow scope right now. And they have an idea that they're going to land one of a handful of people. And there's some stuff that would have to get worked out. I don't know who their preference is. We do know that there have been a couple of there's been some people that are associated with at least one of these coaches that wants people to know that there's interest. There's no doubt about that. So that will be very interesting to see if that interview formally takes place, how that would play out. I think that would be, if all the interviews I would want to be on a fly on the wall for, it would be that interview with Billy Donovan in North Carolina. That would be, and I'd like Roy Williams to be there to shake his hand after some of the stuff that Roy said way, way back in the day about Billy the Kid. And he was Billy the Kid, man. He took college basketball by storm. He was the it dude for a while. And man, his teams were fun to watch. You talk about bigs that could screen. You were talking about the ball screens, and they could roll. They could roll the basket and score on you big time. One of his players on those teams just did he just retire? Haslam played like 20 years in the NBA?
Yeah.
19 years? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he made a living screening and rolling,
Which of the four coaches mentioned would prioritize players in the portal that can go one-on-one? Oh, man, that's a good question.
Where's that question?
down at the very bottom.
Oh, I
Next
see.
to
I'm
the
gonna
best.
let me pop it up.
That's good. That's a good question. Man, as far as one-on-one isolation ball, Michigan runs great stuff. Florida, Donovan, when he was at Florida, ran, like we said, a lot of pick and roll. He's been in the NBA. So you would think there would be some NBA type things there. Lloyd, they liked it. Very offensive friendly. Gosh, I'm gonna be honest. I'm sorry. I really don't have it. I'd have to think a little bit about that. I don't know. I think they all would to a degree. Otzelberger maybe be the least, but I really don't know, man. That's a tough question.
How do you think Tommy Lloyd would view the new and improved Henry Vessar?
I mean, like I say, you've got to give Hubert credit. Hubert used him the right way. Absolutely.
Hubert did. 100%.
He'd love him. He'd love it. Of course, Arizona's barely missed a beat this year. They haven't missed a beat. So he can't say, man, I blew that one. But, Hubert used him well.
Yeah, I like to imagine a big like Noah on a North Carolina when Donovan had him back at Florida. That's what I was thinking of. The person mentioned Noah. I was thinking of him. I was thinking of him when I was thinking of the screen and roll. Seeing Noah roll the basket and flush with all that hair. That'd be a great thing at Carolina.
I saw a question, and I hope I answered this right. I hope it's the way it was intended that you asked. But why would we need to buy out a new coach? Because they're under contract at their schools, and these. I think Andrew went down with me earlier, just a list of the buyouts of each coach. But they are under contract, so that's why I hope I answered that right. And if so, if there are agents, how many are contacting UNC? I don't know exactly, but I would say there's a lot. And I'll say this: I think a lot of these guys, when you hear names, and it's the same way in the portal, you'll hear, well, North Carolina reached out to Andrew Jones. Well, no, North Carolina didn't reach out to Andrew Jones. Andrew's agent reached out to North Carolina, and then they get it out that there was contact. I take it back that there was contact when actually North Carolina didn't have anything to do with it. So I'd say anybody's name that you hear, I can almost guarantee you, anybody's name that you hear agents have reached out to North Carolina and then they've linked it.
I like to, when I report that there's been dialogue, I like to make sure that the school that the agent reached out to, in this case, obviously North Carolina, that North Carolina then reached back out and that the conversation was more than not interested. And I know that with the four people we're talking about, that has been the case, certainly for the three college ones. We know the level of interest from Donovan and his people. I believe that the interest is there from North Carolina based on a conversation I had today as well. And again, one of the intriguing aspects is theoretically you could have him next week. So you can.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Soon. Donovan. You could have Donovan next week. Yes. Someone says here the zero buyout. And the buyouts are there because college football last season, one of the storylines, last two seasons was the amount of money. That coaches were getting James Franklin's buyout, and then the year before when Jimbo's buyout at Texas A&M. Well, schools protect themselves too with buyouts, and the coach it used to be the coach would buy. I remember Larry Shyatt when Clemson. God, this is really going far back, and I'm probably going to spin people's heads on this one. Clemson hired him from Wyoming. And he had like a $500,000 buyout or something. And one of the reports was Larry Shyatt was trying to negotiate a deal with Clemson to give him X amount of dollars a month extra that he could then use that to cut a check to Wyoming every month to pay off his buyout. Well, things have changed. And the buyouts are done by the school. If you want a coach who's under contract, there's a buyout. That's part of your investment right there, and that's what's understood. And that's why if Carolina does get one of these college guys, when you start looking out paying off Hubert, paying off the assistant coaches, and several of them have additional years on their contract from this year, and then you start talking about hiring a whole new staff and doing the buyouts, you're looking at $35 million and up that might have to be invested in a very short period of time. So it's not a drop in the bucket, but I have been told that there are absolute assurances that finances will not be an issue for North Carolina if they identify the right person that they absolutely must have. The finances will be there to make that happen.
A question, and by the way, if they did, and I'm not making any type of, I'm not trying to lead with this at all. If they do end up hiring Billy Donovan, if that somehow happened, remind me to tell you about Larry Shyatt there, because Larry Shyatt really flipped Billy Donovan's career. I mean, he everything Billy Donovan is today, Larry Shyatt's got a big.
He was on his staff, yeah.
I'll just tell you, Larry Shyatt was the muscle. Corey Brewer told me this, that when Larry Shyatt came in, the hammer came in. And when he walked by, the fish didn't swim. And he had their total attention to defense, to detail, and he was that extra hammer that Billy needed. And when he came, the whole thing changed. There was
I knew a guy that used to call him the Barry Manilow of coaching. Very quick Larry Shyatt story. Carolina fans will remember this. It's not a fond memory, but excuse me, Matt Doherty's first season, he had Carolina number 1 in the country. They had won 16 consecutive games. You had Ronald Curry at the point. You had Julius Peppers coming off the bench, a couple of football players, obviously. And they went to Little John on a Sunday or Saturday or Sunday. It was a Sunday. They lost. It was the day that Dale Earnhardt died. And Clemson beat Carolina. I think Tony Stockman had like 800 threes. And that started a stretch where Carolina lost, I think, each of the last 5 weekends of the season, got eliminated in the second round. And that was the game with the Joe Forte famous, "I'm going to the league, throwing the ball at halftime" comment. But that was Larry Shyatt's Clemson team that beat Matt Doherty in Carolina that day. Little sidebar story.
I'm trying to go down and find, there was one specific question. So,
and by the way, I mentioned earlier about Jacob always kind of being on top of me. I just saw where he texted almost an hour ago for me to move the microphone closer to my mouth. So I'm moving the microphone closer to my mouth. I hope Jacob's happy now. I aim to please Jacob Turner. That is my mission in life. Yeah, Kelvin Sampson, someone's talking about from Laurinburg, absolutely. And would have been a great story if he would have won a title last year. Guys like him are obviously not candidates for this job. He wouldn't leave Houston. He could win this year. I wonder if he won one if he'd step down too, if he'd retire. But that said, he's kind of a lifer. He's a dude that he's a coach, man. Yeah, Billy Donovan's not a senior citizen. He's not going to retire in 4 years. The 60 is not anything anymore, and especially for really healthy people like him. I could see if a Billy Donovan came in, I think you could pencil him in for 10 to 12 years for sure. Look at the Sweet 16 right now. There's like 4 or 5 70-year-olds coaching. So I don't think that would be an issue at all, his age. We don't want a 60-year-old. Yeah, that's wrong, guys. Arkansas hired Calipari when he was 65. He's 67 now. You think that they're concerned about it? They're in the Sweet 16.
We appreciate you being a part of this, but you're cutting me deep, man. I'm the same age as Billy, so you're making me feel really old. Of course, I guess I am.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to the grocery store after this. I might get a 10% discount.
Are you gonna get any prune juice?
Oh man.
All right. Will they move into a new arena? Yes, they'll move into a new arena. We'll do new arena stuff later on. We don't want to get into that too much right now. But that's the thing. That's actually, I'll connect your question. Whoever gets hired, very likely is the head coach when they move into the new arena. So that's another thing that they'll have to sell. Listen, we've gone an hour.
I'll see one thing. I've seen a lot of Michael Malone. Right? Like I said, man, we appreciate everybody out there who's made a comment or watching. We really appreciate you. But I've seen a lot of Michael Malone.
Well, also on our board. A lot of that came on our board too. So I don't know. Yes, I do think that. I don't think they should move into a new arena. I'm not gonna say I think they should. I think that they are. Is what I'm saying. I I like the Smith Center. I'm kind of indifferent in a lot of ways because I'm sometimes slow to change. I'm not a big change guy about some things, but at the same time, now that I've seen the numbers, now that I've been in some meetings with some people who are a part of this, I think that it's probably inevitable that they'll be in a new arena. AJ citing anomalies is hilarious. How many
and Scott Worley's
coaches hired in their
been
60s?
drinking prune juice. So he's my kind of guy, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm not lying saying that coaches are always hired in their 60s. I'm not. Griffin likes to go after me. One of the things I like about him is that he's consistent, and I applaud him because he consistently misinterprets and misrepresents everything I say and write, and I love it because he provides tremendous amount of entertainment for me. So, Griffin, continue to dog me every single day of your life because you give me tremendous amount of entertainment value. We're going to go ahead and close this thing out here in a few minutes because we've been going an hour and 40 minutes. I did promise my wife and daughter a little bit of human time tonight, which doesn't happen very often this time of year. Let's see if we could find one more question. Let's see. You got any that you want to hit on here?
What about
real quickly? Someone asked a great question.
Of a new arena positive for candidates? Do you think that they care about that one way or another?
They will when they see the financial benefit. So you want, yeah, especially when you think about his Griffin again. He's anyway, especially when you think about the fact that there could be another wave of realignment in college athletics around the time that the building would open, and to have that much more revenue would put UNC in position if it were to change conferences. I'm not saying that it will, but if it were to do that, it would be in an even more competitive situation to be able to meet what other schools are doing financially or even surpass most. And see, he's wanting me to name coaches that are hired over 60. It's not my job. I know Billy Donovan at 60 is fine. Guys can retire at certain ages. He wants to dog me on stuff like that. That's pretty good. I know that we've elected a couple of presidents in their 70s. So if you can do that job, you can be a damn basketball coach.
You know, I remember when Rick Barnes got to took the Tennessee job about 10 years ago, and he was up well over 60.
Yeah.
And the whole thing right there was that the AD was one of his buddies from Lenore Ryan. I think it was either that or Gardner Webb. I think it was Lenore Ryan. That was one of his buddies from there. He'd given him a parachute package to retire on. And I had guys tell me, look, I'm the same age as him. I don't have the energy to do it. And I think they're probably having more success there than the program's ever had. So he brings it up all the time. You know, I heard him a couple of weeks ago said doing pretty well for a guy that came in just to have a retirement package put together. So.
Yeah, by the way, Jim Larinaga was 61 when Miami hired him. Calipari was 65 when Arkansas hired him. And Kelvin Sampson, I think, was 60 when Houston hired him. You know, it happens. I think that's kind of a silly thing. So let's go ahead and close this thing out. I did get another text message from Jacob. First of all, Carly is probably not thrilled that Jacob's still paying attention to this podcast an hour and 40 minutes in, but he did say this: mic placement advised, everything rolling smooth, good stuff on the mic. So see, I'm getting better. I'm getting the mic closer to me, so I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, let me say too, man, I appreciate everybody here that, like I said, everybody that commented, and I mean everybody that listened, was watching us, you took time out to do that. So I know I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Patina's another one. Everyone's kind of filling in for that. So, but Griffin, seriously, man, I love you. Please don't change. There's a great song by NXS called Don't Change. So for you, whenever I hear that song from now on, I'll think about you. I do not want you to change. I need that daily dose of entertainment value that you do provide. He's David Sisk. I'm AG. By the way,
guys, prediction on a Duke St. John's game. I'm going to say that. I've said it. Okay. It depends. If Duke doesn't get their guys back, I think St. John's can get them. They lock down the defense, and I think we've seen it at Duke, man. They can get – if Cameron Boozer's not clicking, they have a hard time getting it from other places against really good
defense. But they defend.
Boy, they do. So does St. John.
It's hard to
7
imagine a
John.
team that missed their last 24 shots in a game beating Duke the way Duke defends. I'm taking Duke in that game. 75% off, guys. We have a 1-year subscription, 75% off special promo going right now as North Carolina looks for its next basketball coach. Respect back to you too, Gryphon, man. It's all fun. Please, it's all fun, dude. I love your participation. I love the fact that you watch these videos and support what we do. And keep dogging me all you want, man, because I actually encourage the criticism because it always makes us better, especially when it's legitimate, genuine criticism. He's David. I'm AJ. We're going to maybe
Thanks,
do one of
guys.
these tomorrow night. We're not sure. It'll be up to Jacob, but we're doing a lot of these here lately. Look for us to do more moving forward, and we really appreciate the participation and the loyalty from everybody. And really, your passion about Carolina basketball is an incredible thing, and it's something I certainly admire from all of you. So he's David. I'm AJ. Thanks. Take care. Have a good night.
All right. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, let's get this thing out.